Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashrothi, the voice of New Eden, and this is January 6th YC125 Eve Universe Show. Welcome, guys and ladies. How are you guys? How's everybody doing? I'm doing frazzled. Thanks, Solstice. Got my back. No, so before we begin, I want to say that, like, today has been a day of frustration and setback. As I mentioned yesterday, I ran out of my medication, and so I was like, no problem, I'll pick up more today. Well, they're not going to have it in until the 10th. So, kind of running on empty still, but there's plenty. The problem is that EVE Online delivered today, so I'm way too excited to talk about everything that they talked about in the. I'm going to go with live letter. No, the dev chat, as well as So I've got notes from that as well as the actual post that they made today, but also so. I went to go set up this very stream on my YouTubes, and I log in, and it's like, hey, there's been a copyright claim. I'm like, that's unusual. I've been trying to be extremely careful about that recently, but there has been, like, I got a lot of ones, like, last week. Not a lot, but like 5 or 6, based on, like, old videos, and I was like, okay, whatever, fair enough. But, like, so I was like, why did I get another one? And I clicked in, and it was yesterday's stream. I got demonetized for it, or they're taking my money and giving it to the copyright holder because of the opening music, the Beneath the Asteroids, but also because about an hour and a half into the video, I stopped talking for too long. And you guys, and it plays the background music of the game, and I got struck for that. So, not quite sure how I'm going to deal with that. I've already reached out to CCP. I've started the process of having the music muted in those sections. It's by another company. It's not by CCP. Didn't make the strike. This other company did, but we looked into the site, or who these people are, and the only thing that seems to be in their library is the EVE Online album. So I don't know if this is happening outside of their control or whatever. I don't feel bad about it. I'm losing my money. Right? They took my money. Yeah, more talk, less silence. That's the real lesson here. I have to just talk for the entire 2.5 hours to 3 hours straight. No pauses, no silence. Can't stop talking for more than 10 seconds. Let's fucking do this. All right. So, like I said, today has been interesting. It would definitely be one of those days. Like, immediately, I was like, I want to spend my time that I would normally be streaming fixing that. As you guys might be able to notice, I haven't put out my video that is technically already edited because I don't know, I'm behind. But my point is that, like, I was very demotivated to do the stream today, but CCP's update, and more importantly, the video of them talking about it, I feel provided enough information that's worth talking about fresh today. But more importantly, I feel like I have insights I want to get into the public consciousness before we go into the weekend. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the updates that were put out today about the roadmap for 2023. We're going to talk about my notes from the video. I'm not going to cover the video itself. But we'll talk about it. And then what I want to do after that is open up Hobelaks and kind of show a little bit of how I interpret Hobelaks, how it works, why, what it all means, etc. So a little primer on how Hobelaks works, especially as we're moving into this phase in which I'm sure there's going to be a lot more people that are and a lot more things to see and people chittering about stuff. It's useful to be able to detect what is noteworthy versus a copy of something versus something that's likely to change, etc., etc. So that's what we're going to cover today. All right, we excited? Anything we want to cover beforehand? So I'm going to do an ad first while I get the last little bit of this set up. Because that way there's more money for them to take from me, apparently. I just realized. Oh, I'm not going to get cynical. All right. Is everybody back from the ads? Are there people that went to the ads and now are back? All right, great. Okay, so we're going to start with the producer's letter. I'm going to start by probably more or less reading it, okay? Partially because I don't want to miss anything and we might want to pick out individual things, but also because I only skimmed it the first time and was trying to get a general feel for things because things happened relatively quickly today when it came to getting ready for the live letter, the dev chat that they had. All right. Uprisen Capsuleers. It is an incredibly thrilling time to be a Capsuleer in New Eden. This article was written as a combination by CCP Berger and CCP Ritati. Now, these are the two kind of pretty much the two top level executive kind of producer type guys. So they are the ones that look towards the grand vision and kind of how it all relates as it spans through time. For instance, in the chat, they got asked questions about upcoming ships. They didn't actually know about that because they're not the game designers. They're the systems designers, as it were. So that's who wrote this letter, okay? It is an incredibly thrilling time to be a Capsuleer in New Eden as we embark on a new year in EVE Online. The front lines have been buzzing with activity, and some big shifts are happening in the political landscape. Since the launch of Uprising expansion in November 2022, the activity in New Eden has exceeded our wildest expectations, with active player counts swelling since release and, more importantly, pilots being more active in space. Particularly notable has been the sharp 75% increase in PvP kills in low-sec, as well as the 11% PvP kill increase in high-sec, despite the additional restrictions on ganking and changing to Abyssal Dead Space following the release. This has pushed industry and mining significantly, with the Navy ship producing rising 14,709% and capital manufacturing seeing a 34% bump. Okay, so let's break that down. There's a lot of really fascinating stats there, okay? So first of all, 75% increase in PvP kills in low-sec. This should be pretty obvious, right? Like, faction warfare has been incredibly successful. This has led not only more people to be in faction warfare and fighting, but it to be more pirates going to faction warfare space to fight, and etc. And also, you see a lot more. I guess I can't say that they're more expensive ships because they're not using T2, but I actually do see a lot more expensive ships insofar as like battle cruisers, battleships, etc. being deployed in faction warfare space. It's also worth noting that when they specified in the presentation that these stats, when they say 75% increase, they are comparing it to the 2 months prior to the expansion, which admittedly was kind of a low point for things. So, but, keep that in mind. But the point of the matter is that we have a huge increase in low-sec PvP, which would be expected. But then there's this 11% increase in PvP in high-sec, despite the fact that ganking had additional restrictions put on it. And remember, if you're talking about the 2 months prior to that, there's that whole time where there was like a big thing about ganking. All the gankers were mad and they were ganking extra ganking. So that increase is actually kind of significant. I actually suspect that increase is because of the overall activity as a whole. In other words, as there's more people out there doing stuff, the population increases by 20 to 30%, then you would expect that everything would be increased by a certain percent. Now, that percentage might be suppressed by those changes that were made. And I'm not saying that this is 100% true, and I'm not saying that we've raised by 30%. I haven't done that math yet. But my point is that 11% could be explained by just an overall increase in new players in the game, people in high sec in the game, etc., etc. Not saying that people are ganking more, but there's more people that are ganking and more people to be ganked. All right. People ganked more with more accounts during the free days. That's actually a really good point too, Solstice. I wonder how that averages out. That stat could theoretically be misleading. That is actually a really good point too. That we could actually see a huge spike in ganking during that period of time. But at the same time, what's funny is that it's contrasted with the Crimson Harvest, which also has a strong pressure towards ganking because you get 90% drop rate instead of whatever. So that's October. That's 1 month prior to the expansion. So that would have been in the pre-stat. So it is still a pretty impressive stat either way. 14,000% capital manufacturing is one of those stats that's so hilarious that it pretty much tells you exactly what's going on, right? This is happening because the faction dreads happened, right? If any faction dreads are happening at all, capitals require so many more resources than non-capitals that even if no other Navy ships started being produced, those capital ships being produced would massively spike the amount of faction production being made. In addition to that, faction production was also suppressed. Nobody built anything. Nobody built faction ships. You turned ships into faction ships using chips and LP because building them with BPCs was unprofitable as all get out. So again, kind of a misleading stat, but also it's 14,000%. It's also just a hilarious percent, right? It's 147 times more production. That's like cookie clicker numbers. All right. And capital manufacturing up by 34%. So again, this is pretty good. This is probably a combination of Navy faction capitals being made, but also as we see a lot of returning players, plus the fact that capitals were now made to be much cheaper to be built again, means that the ability to build capitals was turned on a few months ago. But now the people are also coming back that are wanting to have those capitals. So we see a 34% increase in production. Again, this is compared to the 2 months prior to it, which was already when the capital forges were firing up again because the changes to industry had already happened. All right. Now that we have entered a new year and marching towards Eve's 20th anniversary, we want to take a moment to reflect on last year. Blah. Uprising. Making faction warfare an exciting area of space filled with action and intrigue was one of the big things aimed to address in Uprising. Territory control is a foundational aspect in EVE Online. We wanted to make it easier to find and participate in the action. Including Frontlines was the first big step to evolving this fundamental system and making it more dynamic. Along with Frontlines, New ships entered the war zone. Existing ships got rebalanced. Complexes were reworked to make them fairer and more fun. And new battlefield sites were introduced. Together, this has created even more ways for players to get involved in and be rewarded for diving in the action. You know what's funny about this? Not only is this all true, I'm actually going to call them out that they almost like buried the lead, right? Because they missed other things, like the fact that the new exploration sites were introduced, the new rendezvous points, the advantage system. And yes, I know that it might be something to ask about, like reciting all that stuff in this kind of review. But my point is that even this statement, even though it seems almost lofty or, you know, whatever, is actually still underselling how monumentally successful this faction warfare update has been. I've actually been flying in faction warfare properly for the last few days, and the frontline system is just absolutely fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. As mentioned in the Faction Warfare dev blog that was released in December, the next big part of Faction Warfare equation is already underway. This next update, coming in Q1, will introduce a feature that we're called Direct Enlistment, which will allow players to join Faction Warfare without leaving their corporate alliance mates. No, man. Well, so I wouldn't necessarily say it's a shill. So remember, I got started being so vocal in podcasting and whatnot because I noted that everybody who was talking about nullsec, and nobody was talking about how awesome faction warfare was, and people were poo-pooing faction warfare, and I saw how awesome it was, and I wanted to help people understand how awesome it was. So, and this is, by the way, in 2013 to 2015, which is the exact time that everybody kind of speaks of the golden age of faction warfare back in the day. So I was right. I was just, people didn't want me to talk about it because they wanted their nullsec rhetoric. So yeah, no, I've been advocating it. I'm okay with being accused as a shill when what CCP did was all of the things I've been recommending since 2015, right? I'm not saying that they necessarily did it because I recommended it, but you can't expect me to hate the changes, right? Anywho, I'm actually more pleased that, like, all of my theories, whether or not they did it because I'm the one that said it, what I've been saying has been vindicated over and over and over again since Uprising. So if anything, that's the reason why I'm excited, okay? It's purely selfish. Anywho, the point is that what we have here is actually something really interesting, which is part of a broader thing that they talked about during the presentation. And that was the idea of these lanes. Now, they mentioned 3 different lanes, and I'm not sure which ones, or what is considered a lane and what's considered part of a lane yet. But one of the big things that they said was that there's heraldry. So they have teams that are kind of working on these things, and each of these features are like a piece of that puzzle, right? So, like, there's empires at war, there's Operation Homefront. There's these different terms that they said every once in a while, but and heraldry was another one that they said was a big thing. So the emblems that we have right now is just the first piece of heraldry. Sorry, my bad. The allegiance system. My bad. That's what I meant. Sorry, I jumped topics there. The allegiance system is one of those, like, chains, right? So they want, and this goes into what I've talked about the allegiance system before, where, you know, I said maybe it probably got delayed because the allegiance system is actually way bigger than faction warfare. And I was right? Like, when they say allegiance, what they mean is basically a fundamental reworking of allegiances, faction allegiances, you know, potentially even corporation alliance allegiances, etc., because they were talking about war decks and all that sort of stuff, which is technically potentially about faction warfare too, but they talked about that as being other issues within allegiance, not just faction warfare. So what they're doing is they are, rather than delay it until all of the allegiance stuff is ready. In the same way as they didn't delay heraldry until everything was ready with heraldry, they released what they could. So too, they're putting the biggest need forward. So rather than trying to complete the entire allegiance system, they're only doing the faction warfare section of it first as their first priority in that vein of production, if that makes sense. So what this will do is, in theory, allow you to join faction warfare and participate in faction warfare activities without having to leave your alliance. They didn't really specify whether or not this would bring on the restrictions of faction warfare. They did suggest that there could be a reduced reward, or rather a bonus reward for those who take the extra step to actually like fully align into faction warfare rather than just use this system to dabble in it. But we'll have to find out more about what that means when we get closer to it. But that is expected to be gotten within the next 2 to 3 months. Well, 1 to 3 months, right? So, yeah, that's pretty cool. So not only did the Uprising expansion overhaul faction warfare, but it also opened the door to personalization. As a Capsuleer, flying your colors allows you to celebrate your allegiance while sending a message to others about who you are. The new Paragon Corporation introduced a new currency, Evermarks, along with new agents, stations, and missions that enable you to acquire Corporation Alliance emblems. The real beauty, however, is that you cannot simply buy your way into these accolades. You actually need to undock and play. These results in more pilots in space, more opportunities for conflict, and more budding industrialists and traders, filling the need created by Paragon. As we move forward, we will add more ways for you to earn Evermarks through your in-game actions. The more recent example of this being the daily login rewards from the Winter Nexus event. So, what we're getting there is that this goes into the fact that the Evermark system and the heraldry system. This is what I was just talking about, where the heraldry is just beginning with the emblems, but also the way, like right now, the only way that we really earn Evermarks, or at least originally, was to turn in ships every day. But then there's login rewards, right? And they actually specified that as, and now we have another way to give Evermarks. So they can now give Evermarks as part of login rewards. So we could possibly see that in the future more commonly. However, I think that the bigger thing here, the thing that might have been missed, is the fact that what they drilled in on is the fact that Evermarks are actually loyalty points. Now, we all kind of deep down inside know that the Evermarks kind of piggyback on loyalty points to make this work. But what I hadn't considered until the video was that it goes the other direction too, right? Since Evermarks are in fact LP, any development that improves the way that Evermarks function is also an improvement to the LP store, right? So now other LP stores could theoretically give you bind on pickup emblems, which admittedly trends extremely closely to like the volatile skin problem, but I think this still to me works better. And I could go into why, but that's a whole long topic. My point is that I'm excited by the fact that, not just the fact that they piggybacked on loyalty points, but really what we're seeing here is a loyalty points revamp disguised as a new feature. Right, exactly. The fact that, so the question was, how do we tax LP, right? And what Evermarks has proven is that now they can make it so that the Corp has their own LP that generates on top of the current the LP that you earn. So that's really critical, right? Like, I don't know if these numbers are true, but if I get 1,000 Evermarks and I'm not in a corporation, I just get 1,000 Evermarks, right? If I am in a corporation, then I get 1,000 Evermarks, and the corporation gets 100, right? The corporation gets 10% of my Evermarks. I'm not saying that this is the real numbers. I'm doing this for the ease of math. But the point is that what this means is that the person who's earning the Evermarks don't have the loyalty points doesn't feel like the corporation's taking from them, but it still allows the corporation to earn LP too. So now in faction warfare, your corporation can actually earn, like, one of the problems with faction warfare is that there is no top level income built into faction warfare. All of the income streams are bottom up that are untaxable by the organizations. So the idea that other people all your corporation members plexing will also generate a small or a pool of LP for the corporation as well, I think that's awesome, especially since you could even theoretically do stuff. So this reminds me of back in the day, there's a game called Asheron's Call, and I really, really, really loved the way that guilds and whatnot was done there, because the way it was done is it was a series of fealties. So I can swear fealty to somebody, and when I do that, now whenever I generate XP, I also give them a small amount of XP. Again, it doesn't take it from me, it just also generates it for them to encourage them to help, these people and make them want to swear fealty to you. So the point here is that in Asheron's Call, there were skills that helped increase the amount of loyalty points, or rather experience points that you sent over, right? Your loyalty rank and their nobility rank, I don't remember if those were the actual names, controlled, like those stats controlled how much extra XP was generated for the boss man. So you could do something similar to that in the same way as, like, we have a skill that that makes us so that we get more rewards from missions. You could have a skill that increases the amount of LP that's generated for the corporation when you receive LP. You lost 40 million station changing. I had 70 mil. On the one hand, that's very sad. On the other hand, the good news is that, in the end, if you learn from this mistake, that loss is going to be trivial to you very, very soon. All right, next. Right. And finally, social will have another skill. The launch of Uprising saw new emblems become available for over 100 ships. It's not available on the Bustard. That's not fair. I'm pretty sure that's still true. With a further of 186 new ships on December 15th. No Bustard, no Marauders, no command ships. Just sad. We will continue to roll out emblems for more ships within the next batch planned for later this quarter. You can expect even more radical customization options in the future, from peacocking your kill marks to making your space and citadels, or marking your space and citadels. They talked about this, everything from putting up custom banners and customization on not just Ensyllabic Stargates, but even the NPC Stargates in your own sovereignty. Things like storm clouds around your structures. It seemed very obvious that while we brainstorm like what cool things could Heraldry do based on what we understand about it, they are still thinking a little bit further outside of that box, right? What else can we do? Sure, structure skins are great, but what else could we do, right? So I think that's pretty exciting as well. Our ambition has been to ease the pathway for new recruits to become battle-hardened veterans and contribute to the battles raging across New Eden. Having redeveloped the entry into the game while empowering new players with opportunities to develop the core skills to their spacefaring adventures, we can now shift our focus onto giving them more meaningful roles in the interstellar war effort. The main design question that we continue to ask ourselves is, How can we make new players become even more capable and ready to engage with empires, corporations, and alliances? Much of the Uprising expansion focus was geared towards PvP, but we also want to enable different methods of contribution to the war effort and accommodate more playstyles. If low-sec is the war zone, then high-sec is the home front, where bullets are made and boots are stitched for the front lines. Ah, that makes Operation Homefront make more sense now. Thanks, Effie. As we start to look beyond Uprising, we'll be taking the learnings from faction warfare and applying them to other areas of space, with one of our focuses being on guiding players into more parts of the sandbox. We're smoothing the learning curve for novice pilots so that they can become valuable recruits for experienced capsuleers. The war machine requires scores of cogs to run efficiently, and capsuleers have a role and purpose, whether it is for fighting for territory on the front lines or supporting the war effort from the home front. Every item destroyed requires replacement, driving industry and mining, the backbone of New Eden. Okay, so the only thing I'm going to say about this, I mean, obviously this is pretty cool, especially since they're saying that they're happy with where they're at and they want to keep moving to the next thing, which is pretty cool. But the thing that they said that I thought was really interesting is that, you know, like, there's the old argument, like, EVE is a PvP game, right? We see this a lot. Even CCP says that EVE is a PvP game. And EVE has PvP, but even if once upon a time you could argue that EVE was a PvP game first and foremost, I think that that didn't always necessarily have to be true, and was never 100% true, and is less true than ever. So, but what they did say is that EVE is a social game, and this is something that they do say a lot. This is something that they've always agreed with. And what I thought was interesting about that was that they said that if somebody wants to be independent, we want to give them encouragement and support, but then push them into fleets. They want people to have to fleet up more. That is a big goal of theirs. And so I think that's going to be really important to keep a bead on as we evaluate the changes coming up, because the idea of like giving the individual the confidence that they need, but then also the need to go fleet, it could go well or poorly. On the one hand, I know a lot of people that are very proud of their solo lifestyle. On the other hand, I feel like there is a glaring hole missing. I think that Invasions really did prove, chapter 1 and 2 especially, that there is in fact a pretty significant hole in EVE for organized low, mid, and even high tier PvE, group PvE. So yeah, that could be cool. And but the other thing is that like we have to get past a lot of the stigmas. We're not going to get people to be able to fleet unless those fleets provide them some sort of protection, or at least confidence, right? So it's not just about giving them the activities to do as a fleet. It's about giving people better fleet tools to be able to do it with, to make that not painful. And because like not most MMOs don't ask you to put yourself at risk by grouping with a bunch of strangers, right? In EVE you are. So I understand that, but that doesn't mean that, I mean, like, hold on, it is EVE, but if I make a delivery contract, the nature of that delivery contract are reinforced by the systems. I can have confidence in the systems. Therefore, I can have somebody haul my stuff. I have a system, the contract system, that provides the reinforcements I need in order to be able to trust other people, knowing that there are technically ways to violate that depending on how the systems get used. Does that make sense? So the issue is that right now, fleets, it's not just about making fleets safe. That's not what I'm asking. I'm saying let's make fleets not a bad idea, right? If I was a new pilot, or if you had a newer pilot, and they were coming to you for advice, and they saw a public mining fleet up, and they were thinking about joining it and go, would you advise them that that is a good idea to do? I would argue probably not. And the issue is that it's not just about having something for the fleet people to do. That they're not asking you to teach them how to mine. They're saying that they want to go join this fleet, whatever it is. It could be anything. There's a new invasion fleet up, but it's a neutral fleet. It's just like a public fleet. Can I join it? Is that safe? What does that mean? What risks do I bring upon myself? How do I protect myself under these conditions? You know, in order for people to be able to go into periods of trust with one another, they're going to need a system to allow people to evaluate that trust better. But yeah. And it may not be giving them protections insofar as making it so that they can't gank you. That's probably pretty unreasonable. The issue is more about making sure that everyone understands what is and isn't permissible within the fleet. Does that make sense? I don't know if this is... I don't think this is as big of a problem as the old school, like, corporation AWOXing thing. I don't think we're too far away from... I think this is a solvable problem. I'm just pointing out that it's more than just having the thing for the group to do. There are still things about the way that groups come together that probably need some work, just given the high paranoia nature of EVE Online. There needs to be... Or here's a better way of putting it. Rather than giving them protection, there needs to be things that you fleet up for that you use relatively cheap equipment that can't just be circumvented by a solo person using better equipment, right? Like, for instance, the 5-man plexes that only allow Navy. If there is a PvE version of that, now I can only bring, T1 and Navy ships. No one's worrying about billion-isk whatevers. We're just talking about 30 to 50, content that's designed to be ran by 30 to 50 million-isk ships. But still pays pretty good because it requires a lot of coordination or whatever. If you could create a toned-down version of an invasion site, even if you could do minor conduits, in such a way that it was gated so that it required you to have the cruiser or battle cruiser down, kind of like the solar deployment sites, how they're cruiser down, except for those don't have as much of a point and they're super dangerous for cruiser down. I don't think it's balanced correctly, but that same sort of concept. I think that there's space there for it to now be a good idea for newer players to open up the Fleet Finder, see a random fleet, join it, and have that not be the worst idea ever, right? That's all I'm saying. I don't know what that looks like, but I feel like that's what they're wanting. So, Solstice, though, you say that it's a PvE game with PvP elements nowadays. Here's the thing about that. first of all, CCP is the E in PvE. So the idea that everything, the majority of the content that CCP puts in is PvE makes sense. That's what they can put in. At best, the only thing that they can do is give PvE that you can fight over, like a battlefield or faction warfare, right? But like by definition, they are the E. So that's what they focus on. But here's the thing. What does that do for you? What do you need as a PvP pilot? You need other players. And you need other players that know how to play. And the way we get there is by having PvE that better engages players and gets people to fly together and as a fleet. If I can get 4 people or 5 people to regularly fleet up with 2 execs and 3 vexers to fucking run some PvE for a night, I can get that same group of people to then take that same fleet, now that they've gained some confidence in fighting, into faction warfare and fight it out there against players. That's the God honest truth. If you want good PvP, you want good PvE. This is 100% true. I know it's true because it's how we've done it. That's what we've been doing. The thing is that, like, we literally trained our Logi by taking them on the Zoria challenge. If a Logi pilot can heal, can help, can hold in the Zoria challenge of the World Arc, they can be a Logi pilot in any PvP fleet there is, period. Where are those so-called PvPers? A lot of them are out there PvPing now. One of them is a goon, a couple of them joined Goon Swarm. A lot of them are an Aderon. That's how this works, man. People need to learn and grow confidence. And if we can let them learn and grow confidence as a fleet, then they will move to more challenging things as a fleet. My point is that I was using my group as I proved out the concept, because this is actually happening elsewhere too. Like, this is happening all over the place ever since the war deck changes. You do realize that outside of high sec ganking is killing PvP. Also, like, a lot of things is that, like, there's been a lot more high-end, high-sec PvP, too, with structure fighting and the war decks. Like, I would argue that war deck changes improved the quality of warfare. In fact, like, made it so that there was more high-quality conflict in high-sec than before the war deck changes. You're right, structure bashing isn't PvP. But a 100-man Macarial fight versus a 110-man Cerberus fight is PvP. Turns out people defend their own structures too. I do talk to them. Okay, whatever. That's a good point. Either way. An issue that many leaders face is the funding of these organizations. We hear this time and time again, where player corporations and alliance leaders of all sizes and areas of space need to lean on taxes and bounties for the goodwill of few through donation, or the goodwill of a few through donations to run their organizations. This is simply not sufficient for the myriad of different activities and groups rely on, such as abyss running, loyalty point generation, market trading, wormhole blue loot, and more. Allowing avenues of taxable income will ensure that important programs like SRP will continue to allow novice pilots to take the steps into more challenging content and encourage more experienced capsuleers to take larger ships, to risk larger ships. We have already started experimenting with this through a one-to-one Evermark Corporation contribution. Oh, it's a one-to-one into the corporation wallet. This is just the first experiment with Corporation LP wallet, and it's something that we look to expand this year. We already talked about that. Oh boy. A lot of the war changes was about keeping players in the game and keeping social groups intact. Previously, a group of 10 friends had to stay in an NPC corp that shared chat channel. Now they can be in a corp together without getting war decked until they're ready to own a structure. Not only that, but what actually happens is time and time again, the group comes together and they're able to stay together and be successful until they get that structure, and then they anchor the structure. And then, you know, a few weeks to a few months later, they learn that that means that they can now be war decked, whatever the heck that means. And now they have skin in the game and an identity to fight over. And a lot of them choose to fight. Now, they often lose because they're a brand new group of barely put together people against an experienced war deck corp. But I don't have people coming to me saying, like, how do I get my stuff out? It's a lot of the time it's how do we fight it out? How do I get some way to defend this whole thing? Which is good. The internal metrics were 100-man high-sec group gets war decked, 70 of them stopped playing, and when the war expired, 35 of the 70 that stopped come back to the game. Exactly. You know, the war deck system, it didn't actually help spur conflict. It just made it so that you couldn't establish identity. Who fights Black Flag? Well, I don't. Well, you can, Garland. You can. As it turns out, you absolutely can. All right. On funding, we have prioritized contested income, formerly known as passive income, a source valuable enough to take, hold, and defend. In Uprising, we created several new gameplay systems introduced in faction warfare that could also be applied elsewhere. The frontline system has shown that we can create high conflict zones, which are ideal candidates for these contested income sources, since they create areas of vulnerability. We much prefer this high-value sites in areas of substantial risk rather than having highly defensible systems. I don't think they mention it here, but a good example of this is the AO Blue Star New Ore thing, right? By having certain systems have special value, now taking and holding those particular systems has special value. We believe that creating more ways for players to get involved in the war effort will set us on the path of creating the ultimate interstellar war machine, which in turn will make New Eden an even more vibrant place filled with excitement, intrigue, and infinite possibilities. Like, yeah. Friendship machine to war machine. You've heard us talk about the friendship machine. We believe that the social connections made in New Eden are one of the most important aspects of EVE Online. People create meaningful friendships through fleets, corporations, and alliances. Running and operating these social entities can be very daunting, as well as taking the leaps to join them. But getting more players involved is incredibly important, especially in fleets, as EVE is best played with friends. Watching the emerging social organizations form in the war zones have been truly inspiring, where old and new capsuleers join forces in taking the objectives at hand. This is something that we've seen in public fleets, such as MPSI fleets, over the years, and something on which we wish to put more focus on in this next phase of development. So, what if... Here's a good example, and this is a half-baked idea. Okay, I'm going to start out by saying that. But an example would be, what if there was a fleet that in order to be in the fleet, you must have safety green? I mean, obviously there's ways to work around that. There's ways that that can be still a problem, but that's a potential example of how you could make fleets that voluntarily have conditions that would make them more enticable to public groups. That will be a dead fleet? Well, I mean, somebody could always drop fleet at the and then like join a different fleet and have people warp in and all that stuff. But at least at that point, like there's a difference in warning and the backstabber is a bit more clear. That's what I'm saying. Like you could still theoretically circumvent that. But I feel like the idea of like the peace not your sword is a potential way to just give them a little bit more, you know, at the very least, I can say, in the same way I can say that my corporation doesn't allow AWOXing, I can say that my fleet doesn't allow AWOXing. Fleets with a minimum sex status, that's a good one too. You get, I think that these are potential ideas. Now, are any of them good? There's probably something wrong with all of them. All right. The point is that we can't just tell people that they need to be in fleets unless we make that into a good idea, because otherwise they're just going to quit the game and think it's stupid, right? If we tell them that they need to be in a fleet, but being in a fleet is a bad idea, then they're just going to get a game that makes more sense. That's the real problem. Future of EVE evolved. With the Uprising expansion, immersion of EVE has been elevated to an even greater heights through visual and audio enhancements backed by significant performance and UI improvements. The new epic Upwell hangars allow you to marvel at your achievements, really convey a sense of scale in the stations and ships from the safety of your dock. Uprising also saw the release of several audio updates enhancing the sensory experience, and all of this supported by performance improvements and modern UI. Epic blur, yeah. The depth of field thing still needs work. Photon UI has been testing for the past 6 months and now has an adoption rate of over 91%. Thanks to player feedback, there's been several improvements, new features, and fixes made it to the process. Look, guys, I have heard all kinds of complaints still about Photon UI, but this is one of those things that when people start complaining about Photon UI, they quickly reveal that they have no idea what has happened to the Photon UI. Trust me, if you haven't tried it recently, check out the Photon UI and then go back through all of your windows and make sure to switch them to compact mode and turn off light mode and just see how well you like it. Okay? Just give it a shot. It ends up being pretty good. All right. Over the last couple of years, we have carried out important foundational work that enabled us to build Uprising, our first expansion since 2018. We aim to continue releasing expansions of this caliber going forward with additional updates, more shining toys, riveting world events like the Stellar Transmuter incident, in-betweens to keep New Eden vibrant, active, and well-balanced. With the Uprising expansion, we took a big step towards realizing the future of war in New Eden, and yet there's still much more to come. We are thrilled to reveal our high-level roadmap in EVE Online for the year ahead. And we will be talking about this in depth in a little bit. Uh-oh. Adoption rate is 90% because it's opt-out. Yeah, I mean, that's still not bad. You're right, people do have to be informed of it, but to make it opt-in as a secret feature and then be like, oh, only a low percentage of it adopted it, then the correct answer is, well, that's because they didn't know about it. Either way. We are kicking off this year with a celebration. Eve's lunar year will begin on the 19th of January, and alongside this celebration, we'll be bringing simplified Chinese to tranquility. NetEase has been pioneering the frontiers of EVE Online in mainland China and building a future for their two servers, Serenity and Infinity, for that region. We want to recognize our Chinese-speaking players outside of the mainland China that have built strong alliances and made their mark on New Eden over the past 2 decades. I find this really interesting. Like, somebody asked me, well, what do you think about the Chinese localization? And I was just like, it seems like a no-brainer, right? Like, in order for there to be the Chinese client, they would have had to have already had it be translated. Like, the work is done. So why wouldn't you integrate it? So, yeah, good. Makes sense. Furthermore, towards the end of January, the Microsoft Excel plugin... You know, I actually had that on my list of, like, things in 2023 that they talked about in FanFest that they just, like, suddenly stopped talking about, and so it was, like, in jeopardy. But nope, we got an update. Microsoft Excel plugin developed in collaboration with Microsoft will be soft launching in closed beta trial. Announced at FanFest last year, the integration will enable Omega capsuleers to log in and directly pull in-game data from their Microsoft Excel. We believe that this is level the playing field by providing easy and simple access to in-game data without requiring coding knowledge. The official launch is planned on the EVE's 20th anniversary in May. So, like, I feel the thing I find weird about this particular thing, and this isn't even just hating it. This is just the thing that always gets me about this thing. People have unfair or uneven access to data. The people with the technical expertise have access to all of this awesome information. The average layperson does not. That's one of the problems that's trying to be solved here. But now what they're doing is they're making it so that, because, like, the goal of this is to make it available to everyone. But now they're making it so that it's available to everyone with an Excel, with a copy of Excel, right? Like, that, I don't have a copy of Excel. I use Google Sheets. It's always felt kind of weird to me, where it's like, yeah, we're opening it up for everyone. I don't know. Microsoft Office Online is free, just like Google Docs. I wonder if this is going to work as good. Well, A, I need to look into that then. And B, I wonder if this is going to work with that. Either way. For more information on post-uprising, blah, 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 blah. As we enter into the 3rd decade, we are one step closer to the mission. Yeah, got it. Cool. So, next. Let's look at this real quick. I have a few things to talk about here. In the Q1 section, yeah, was it? I can't remember if it was them reaching out, but I remember, yes, you're right. I do remember that it was that Microsoft has been pretty active with it. But my point is that I'm not really complaining about it. I'm more just like, it's more of a tongue-in-cheek criticism, right? Where it's like, oh, you're making it accessible to everyone in a very capitalistic way. Especially since it's also Omega only. So it's like, yeah, it's accessible to everybody who paid money. Anyway, so Q1, we've got direct enlistment. We know about that. We've got faction campaigns, which we don't really know about exactly. Let's see. I don't think I've seen this picture before. Nor, I'm not sure if I can recognize 100% what these structures are. This thing looks like it's trying to maybe be a Minakawa, but if that is, then this closer one doesn't feel like it makes very much sense. I also don't know if this picture is relevant to anything besides the fact that, look, the factions are fighting each other. It does look very much like a generic Caldari and Galente fight, right? So probably nothing to read there. local New Year's celebration and Chinese localization. So when we look at the Hobelaks thing, stuff, we've got some stuff to look at there, but we've got very little information about what is going to be part of this Lunar New Year celebration. Whether or not this is going to be part of the like ongoing thing, whether or not this is going to be like because I mean, like every year has a Lunar New Year, right? So, yeah, that's cool. And then of course the Eve.xl. Now the ones I really want to focus on though is this one and this one over here. Okay, I have. Oh wait, that one doesn't even show it. Hold on. That one. So, let's talk about my theory about these two. This one first. So, the first Eve expansion. Now, we've been talking about this quite a bit, all right? What this shows to me is that what the last faction campaign was about, and what the next faction campaign is likely going to be a continuation of, is the development of these stellar transmuters. What they can do, what they're used for, what their effects are, culminating in the release of players' abilities to make their own transmuters and deploy them as part of this expansion. So I feel like this picture is hinting that this expansion is going to be themed around the conclusion of those events, right? The developments of those transmuters and what they're capable of. All right? And then this one I find also interesting. So I don't know how much I can read into this. There's a part of me that wants to be like, oh, look, there's a person on the ground. This is a hint that it's connected to the shooter or whatever. But it's worth noting that this person on the ground is Lady Catus Tashmerkon. And this is the Amarian Golden Fleet laid out in front of her, right? In fact, I think this is even from the Uprising trailer. So, it's hard to read into that if this is something that, like, it's hard for me to say, yes, this is about the shooter, per se. Like, I feel like that's a bit of a stretch. It does seem to suggest that we will continue a focus on the empires. Or these two pictures are completely random. I just don't feel like that's the case, right? CCP is way too cheeky about the way they do things. The chances that these pictures are at least some sort of cheeky hint is very high. Well, no, not all of them are from letters that last year. And by that, I mean some of them are from other things, right? Like Halloween Horrors is from older. But either way. So, yeah, I think that that's going to be interesting, especially since direct enlistment also is going to require like a ramping up of things, a kind of call to arms. Which is why I may actually temper my prediction from yesterday, which is that the next faction campaign is going to start this month. I realize that, like, with direct enlistment coming, although they did say it's probably going to be sooner than we would expect, I assume that direct enlistment and the faction campaign are going to be entwined together. In other words, there's going to be some sort of call to action that's going to involve loosening the restrictions of which Capsuleers are able to participate in the Emergency War Powers Act, Militia War Powers Act, right? That those two things are going to be kind of connected. 10-to-1 goons make a mockery of it. Well, I mean, the thing is that it's hard. I mean, like, technically they already did that once, but the worst they can do is just participate in it. No. They said Q1 and also sooner than we would expect. So, and they were talking more broadly, like not about any individual change, but they said that like things are coming before that we would expect. And in the context of within the Q1, in other words, it is within the next 3 months, and there's probably stuff coming out this month that we would expect to come out in the month after or the month after. That's how I interpreted it. It's also worth noting that they said that the Rifter, the new Rifter model, is coming out on Tuesday, which means when we look at Hobelaks, that is, we can assume that basically everything on Hobelaks is going to be patched over, which isn't much, but we are going to get a minor patch next week, unless they add more stuff in all of a sudden. So there is also a couple other things. Switch Empire based on profit, refuse to fire on courtmates. Well, again, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of emergent behavior comes out of it. So this has me very excited. They were talking about improvements to the UI, and these are mini widgets. So, in other words, rather than having your entire inventory window, you can just have this little bar that says how full your inventory is and allows you to swap between inventories right here. Rather than have my big window of locations in space, I can just have this with a drop down that I can set. So I can preset what bookmark I want this thing to be paying attention to, and then click on warp to there. That is huge. And this one, which I got it from our Discord, so somebody circled it. The idea that local will now just give you a report of how many of each thing is in local. How long have we been asking for that, right? And you can even have a shorter version of it. I was happy when you could compress local the way you could. The fact that you can't do it, the fact that you can get this is awesome. Now, the thing is that, here's the thing. This feature is already in the game, kind of. Like, they're stating it as if it's like a brand new feature. But that's not fully genuine, because like you can go like this. This is what I like to do, okay? So I have my chat window up here, right? But if I double click on the window header, it window shades, right? So you can minimize things like that, and then you can just have it. Now, obviously, this is an improvement to this because it gives me the information on there too. But really, all they're doing is doing an improvement to this function. All I really want is for it to stay shaded when I tell it to, right? When I like, how many times it's actually really hard for me to keep this shaded and also, you know, like bring it in and out, especially since the window, the space that I can double click and not accidentally click on a tab or click on the open channel or click on the menu. Like the amount of pixels that I have to work with, especially if it's like this, it's like, where can I even, there we go. So, yeah. Happy to see improvements about that, though. The idea of the probe scanner is kind of weird. But maybe. The directional scan one's great. I just see having a stack of these, right? As your intel. I love it. I love it. And I think that might be it for that, for visuals. Let me see. Any other notes? So yeah, they expressed that there's a 20 to 30% increase in player activity. So that goes back to my original point, which is that like if you see a 20% increase of player activity and an 11% increase in high-sec PvP, that just makes sense. Yes, these are from the stream. In fact, that still suggests that the changes had some suppression effect on high-sec PvP, but not enough to overcome the overall increase in activity. So one of the things I found really interesting was that when they referred to the Stargate Trailblazer event, remember, these guys know about things from a very high level. Like, for instance, when they were talking about the API, he actually didn't remember, he didn't know the history of the API off the top of his head. That makes sense if you think about it for a long time. But so the way that they refer to things can help understand what they value from it. And what they stated was they talked about the Stain Stargate construction. So out of all of the Stargate constructions that was happening, the one that stood out to them was the Stain one. Now, they were bringing it up in the context of the development of faction campaigns. So what they were saying is that the lesson that they learned from the Stain Gate was that players were upset that they weren't able to stop it. And so because of that, anytime we see the faction campaign concept, right, which are these things right here, so the Othanoon campaign and the Transmuter campaign, these are not going to be fluff things. By definition, faction campaigns are going to bring forth a change in the universe. That is a rule now. So that's interesting. They referred to lore people as fanatics, which, thanks, I guess. Yeah, we got to give things to the fanatics, too. No, I'm just kidding. But in reality there, though, what I really liked was that they touched on the idea of having an understandable story, right? If a game is actually going to pull in new players, then you have to make it something that you can pitch. You have to make it something that you can explain to your friend that doesn't play Eve. And the nuances of sovereignty and goon swarm and coalitions and all that kind of stuff is at best overwhelming and at worst uninteresting to the average person. But the space drama that is playing out in the actual lore is a story that people can actually talk about outside of the context of the mechanics of the game and make people understand it, right? Hey, look, the Amar accidentally blew up one of the stars. The Galente invaded these two constellations and seized control of it. The Kaldari have moved into Nullsec, or the example that they gave, Niarja's gone now. Like, these are the things that makes people. It was accidentally, because that was not the intended effect. I actually am of the opinion that if all three of the transmuters were held by the Amar and the Amar completed their project in time, they would have actually completed the loop that they were looking to create. The Mimitar took two of the transmuters and completed their research project, which is what allowed them to safely shut down those transmuters. But in the process, I believe, this is 100% conjecture, that the rules were, if the Amar hold all three, then they get their linked up thing. If the Amar do not hold all three, then the remaining ones blow up. Does that make sense? That's what I think happened, but I have no idea for sure. They did stress the fact that events are going to be massaged in order to fit into the story, which is what we saw a little bit of last year, where like each event kind of plays into what's going on, with the Easter event being connected to the Or? Was it? No, it was the Angel Cartel one. The Guardians Gala was about Or. The Easter one was about capital ships. The capital ship production rebalance. I think that might be it. I think that's what I got. Oh, there was an interesting question about attributes, which I found even more interesting that they hummed and hawed about it. Kind of implies that the idea of like the big end all state of it with removing attributes, like that high level or that big threat that they mentioned in FanFest, is a pretty long ways to be to realize. But it, as they said, that they have these different lanes. So the Operation Homefront is about high-sec and newbie player stuff. Empires at War is about like faction warfare and how warfare plays out in general. And Heraldry is about how we customize our appearance and have personalization. And I think that is actually the 3 lanes that they were referring to. So yeah, attributes would be in the Operation Homefront lane, but not necessarily near the front of it. Yeah, I don't know. The thing is that the attribute thing is a complicated thing, and I've talked about it before. I don't feel like drilling too deep into it now. I believe that attributes serve a purpose, but I also have accepted the fact that maybe it's a relic of a bygone era that isn't quite working. I still believe that it can be fixed by the simple addition of 2 additional buttons on the skill queue page. Have a button that says remap to this skill queue, and when you click on it, it brings up the remapper that is remapped to be optimal to whatever your skill queue is, and it tells you how much you save because of it, just like Evemon would. And the other one is a button that says reset remap that automatically resets you to 2020, 2019 without using a remap. Those 2 things. That's it. That's all you need. Anywho. So, let's talk a little bit about Hobelaks before we wrap things up. Oh no. Do I have a light mode for this? Hold on. I don't think so. Give me a second. Ah, wrong one. I would hum, but I don't want to get copyright strike. I'm not bitter, you're bitter. All right, well, that didn't work at all. Cool. Come on. Hey. Whew. No. I wanted to be silent so that way I could be copyright striked. So, here we go. Is this going to work? Kind of. Okay. What we have here is a website known as Hobelaks. Whoopsie. Do all that. Let me come over here to here and put in a bookmark. Okay. What we have here is a website called Hobelaks. Oh, the multiple overview thing is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, ever. All right. So, Hobelaks. What is Hobelaks? How do you understand it? Why do you understand it? What should I freak out about? Let's talk about that. So, Hobelaks is a website that basically what they do is every single time either the Tranquility or the Singularity server or client, the application, is updated, it takes the update, it reads in all the files, it detects any differences between those files, and it collates them and puts them on here. So what's important to remember, there's two things that's important to kind of remember when interpreting things on here. One, Singularity is varying degrees of complete. And things on Singularity are in varying degrees of completion. So just because something is messed up doesn't mean it's going to be that way. Just because something is a certain way doesn't mean it's going to stay that way, etc. But it does honestly let us get a good look at things quite frequently. The other half, though, is that you need to remember that the information here is being interpreted, right? Like, it's pulling the strings from the string file. It's pulling the stats and everything. So you need to understand what it's saying with its interpretations in order to be able to, it's not the same as if you pulled the data yourself. There could be information there that isn't being caught because it's not interpreted by the parser, if that makes sense. So let's talk about it, or let's look at this. So we have new items, we have blueprints and reprocessing, traits, attributes per site, per type, effects per type, clone states, expert systems, strings, new files, and change files. So the big ones are new items, attributes and attributes per type, effects per type, and strings, and new files. Okay? New items are where we get exactly what you would think. New items, right? Now, this is kind of interesting. One of the things that's here is that these guys here appear to be copies of the current faction warfare rats. But because this is a diff from Tranquility to Singularity, these rats are new. These are not on Singularity or on Tranquility yet, and these spawners are new. So basically, it looks like they're copying most of the faction warfare sites for some reason. It's hard to tell what it is, but that is what we're seeing here. We also see the accelerators that are coming up for the Guardian Gala, right? And here we see just, like, these can be somewhat useful when it comes to, like, seeing if it's an effect or something, but in this case, so we see Mimitar HQ, Galente HQ, Caldari HQ, and Amara HQ, which implies that there's, like, a new kind of site, a new kind of place, potentially, whatever these HQs are. And maybe that could be related to these rats. So, like, these rats look like they're part of the Plex, but it could actually be that they're from here. However, that doesn't necessarily explain why all of these sites that are basically the normal event sites, or the normal faction warfare sites that already exist, what exactly they're doing here, unknown yet. Now, it's worth noting that we can also go here, and there's multiple divs at the top, right? So right now I'm looking at the difference between Tranquility and Singularity. But let's say I want to know when these things got added, right? I want to know when these guys were added and what was added with them. So I go back one record, and I see, oh, the last time Sissy was updated, which was 9 hours ago, they actually didn't add in any new people. So that was not where this update came from. The only thing that happened this morning was 5 new strings put in and some audio put in and some files changed. Now, a lot of these files, honestly, especially since, look, they're all changed, but they're all about the same, and they're loaders. So these are probably pre-generated. You see a lot of these kind of changed files that are just like them regenerating background information or adding one entry to some sort of flat file. So what you can look for here, though, honestly, what I look for in both of these cases is I will look for, let's go back to the Tranquility Singularity version. I'm going to look for arrows, because then I can open it up and see an image. I can pull out images, I can pull out videos. You can technically pull out other things too, if you're tricky about it. But this is how we catch images or whatever that's being put into the game. And most of them are pretty innocuous or, you know, random UI. I will say, as a pro tip, if you're just looking for the ones that quote unquote matter, you can search for the number 512, because that's at the end of all of them it says the rate, right? So here is the 128 pixel and here's the 64 pixel. So there actually isn't a 512 on that one. But you can look here, none of that came from here. So if I go 2 back, I can see, okay, well, these 2 items, these are kind of interesting. There's a Shady Wreck, and there's a Shady Vindicator. They are both listed as QA, which means chances are these items are never going to be something that we actually engage with. But it allows them to test something. What are they testing? So what I find really interesting is that we now have a new attribute. No, wrong one. Yeah, a new attribute. And that new attribute was actually added in previously, I think. Hold on. Because if we go into the Tranquility Singularity, we can see... Oh, no, I guess that is when it was added in. It is added in at the same time. So, at the same time as this QA Shady Wreck is added in, we see this new attribute, flag all suspect on loot wreck, which has the description of all players will be flagged as suspect when looting a wreck with this attribute. So what this means is that they can make now a ship that's wreck cannot be looted by anyone by definition. In other words, they could make a site in HiSec where the final reward requires you to go suspect in order to loot it. Which is pretty bonkers. I wonder, my theory is that this could be related to the lunar event. Because the lunar event, the Lunar New Year, is related to fortune and luck. And this is the year of the rabbit. So the idea of an event that asks you to be dirty and steal and take your chances and take risks, I think slots in really well with that theme. But again, the only thing I really have is that there's these QA items. There also was an additional QA item that was put in, which is a QA listening post. People will just use cloaky alts. Well, there's all kinds of different solutions. That's the thing. How are we going to solve it, right? Who knows? Different people will do different things. But I find that really interesting. Again, because it's a QA thing, this is like, may not ever mean anything. But the fact that they added in a new attribute suggests to me that that is important and that that's what these QA items are for. That's all. I don't know if I can find an example of it right now. See, yeah, here's the QA salvager. So there's a QA salvager. as well. So there's a salvaging component to this too. And that was added in at the same time as the other stuff that we've been looking at. And the QA Shady Mobile Observatory. So there's a mobile observatory and a vindicator and a wreck that nobody can loot. It's just kind of weird. So now, if you wanted to check these things out on Tranquility or in-game, underneath the first entry, right, here's how it looks originally. And I can click on this arrow and open it up and see all the items. But then there's this second arrow down here, and I can click on it. And this is all of the different URLs. And so this allows me, here's an example. I can go to one that's like older, right? Or I can go to Tranquility change. Here we go. Oh God, I chose like a big one. Hold on. Whatever. So I can go here and copy this Sacrilege Aurora Universalis skin. And I can go here and open up my notepad. And just paste it. And look, there it is. And I can pull it up. So that's how you can pull up stuff quickly and easily from Singularity. You can actually grab, or not Singularity, but from Hobelaks. So I could grab like all of the Nirvana implants or all of the White Storm boosters. And come back over here and paste. And there they all are. Done. And I can click on them and open them up. So it's just a quick and easy way of getting a link to something. All right. Now, whenever you see a change in the ships, when you see balances to ships and modules, you're going to see that in the attributes per type. Okay? So, for instance, in this case, what we're seeing here is a whole bunch of skins that are being changed from not having a place on the market to having to being organized as to where they are on the market, right? So this flag is allowing it to show up on the market more or less, right? And then these expired ones are moving it so they're no longer published. They've changed it to a different group, and that group went from special edition festival asset to none, right? And this is one of those interpreted ones, right? Like group ID. Oh no, I guess that's wrong. Never mind. I'm silly. If I go back to the Tranquility Singularity build change, we can see like, hold on. No, this is the same one. Boo! Nope. I don't have a good example. But when they make stat changes, it'll also show up here, right? You can actually, we can go and, is there a way? If we go to about, we should be able to go. Older Hobelaks updates. So from here, we can look. Ooh. It's a longer list than I expected. So here we go. So we could go. grab that URL, go back to Hobelaks, and that allows you to grab a different time outside of the bounds. So like here is when Turner happened, for example. Wow, I picked good. So here we can see that the Vagabond, here's where the Vagabond lost power grid. Here's where the Vagabond lost power grid. Here's the hack changes basically. And then all of the Navy battlecruisers were changed to require level 2 skill instead of level 1, etc., etc. So you will see stat changes here. Now, it's worth noting that sometimes the stat is backwards than you would expect. Like, I think resistance changes are that way. But in general, you know, that's true. One of the other things that's worth noting and worth paying attention to when it comes to this sort of stuff is that sometimes it's backwards, right? If Tranquility has been updated, but Singularity has not, then all of the diff will be backwards. It'll say that everything's being removed, and, you know, it was the new thing, and now it's going to the old thing. Because Singularity is always seen as new, and Tranquility is always seen as old, right? So, either way. The biggest secret, though, is strings. Strings are the big one, man. Like, you see changes. Often what we'll do is, because everything's in order, it can also be fun for some civilian ships. Like the old trader convoy spawns, like the Galente Hauler, where it doesn't make sense that you have looting rights on it, even though you killed it. Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point, Satonia. So yes, there are practical purposes for that thing. I feel like doing tinfoil that it's associated with the lunar event. So that's my tinfoil. Okay. So here we're seeing a bunch of corrections, which are fine because it's in order again, right? So these are strings that are being changed, and then after that we're going to see the strings that are being added, right? So, and these get added in sometimes a little bit early. So when we talk about like how we know how sites are going to work or whatever, even though we've never seen them before, this is usually how, because we can pull all of the strings that have all the explanations of everything and know, right? Like, I knew what a propaganda tower did because here it is. Propaganda broadcast structures are deployable structures that increase advantage points in the system that they are deployed in. They must be defended but for a period of time in order to gain advantage points. You can buy propaganda broadcast structures in your militia LP store. So just from that, even if they haven't announced that feature yet, I already know that there's going to be a thing called advantage, and these things increase it, which I'm sure is a good thing, right? And then from the other ones, I can kind of deduce, okay, well, listening posts allow me to get rid of their advantage, etc., 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 and I can piece that together. So using the strings, we can kind of figure out what the hell is going on sometimes. However, this is one of those places that CCP's actually kind of gotten pretty clever on because they know that. So what they'll do is they'll put in some stand-in text. I doubt I can just pull one up for this. They'll put in some stand-in text. Sometimes it's obviously stand-in text. Sometimes it's less obvious. But they will transform. So basically, they'll create an item and assign it all of its strings and everything, but have those strings say nothing of value. And then at the last second, all they do is they change the string. And what that does two things. One, it makes it so that we don't detect it when it comes across as a new item. We don't see it as a new. We don't like it's in its incomplete form. I only see like snark, you know, and that doesn't help me with anything. And then later on, it becomes defined for what it is. But by that point, it's no longer a new item. It's now a changed item, which is different. So they'll try to sneak things in through that. And then reprocessing a lot and blueprints is pretty straightforward. So attributes per type and effects per type. Like, what we'll see is... Let me see a good example. Are there any of these that have, like, a new effect? Maybe? What about that Turner one? There we go. So what you'll see is, it's just like the attributes, right? So, ship bonus Dreadnought M4. What does it do? It is the Mimitar. It's the, I assume that this means that it's the bonus for the Mimitar skill. Let's see. So, down here, under attributes per type, we're going to see... There it is. Ship bonus Dreadnought M4. So, it's the 4th bonus that you get for having the Mimitar Dreadnought skill. So here you see that bonus being created, and here we see that bonus being applied to the Naglfar. Likewise, over here, the effect, so we see the system strength, the sensor strength bonus effect being created, and down here we see the system scan resolution or sensor strength bonus being applied to the Turner Aftermath beacon. In the same way that we see skill multiplier ship bonus Dreadnought Mimitar. So this is the Dreadnought Mimitar Dreadnought's bonus to webbing, right? Because remember, they added in the web bonus to the Mimitar Dreadnought later. So this up here, the attribute provides the skill and its interaction. Down here provides the actual effect itself, if that makes sense. So once again, though, it gets created here, and then it gets applied here. The other good value to this, though, with the effects per type, is if we go back to this one. There it is. So the other good thing that's useful for this is when they add in a new item, right? Now, the stats for the ship are right here, although some of them are kind of confusing. Like I said, the explosive damage resistance being 0.2 means that it takes 80% of the explosive damage. I'm pretty sure, right? Yeah. So, you know, these things are kind of backwards to what you would... Well, I mean, actually, those are straightforward. No. It's the other way around, right? Because shield EM damage resistance of 1 means that it has 0 resistance in shield. It takes full damage. So yeah, according to this, this rat has 50% EM, 80% explosive, 63% kinetic, and 53% thermal resistance. Now we can double check this actually by grabbing this number and going to Eve, not Chuck, there's Chunker, but EveRef, evref.net, and we like click on a random thing and then replace the type number with the, oh, nope. Oh, right, because it's on Hobelaks, it's on Sissy still. I need to pick one that's on Tranquility. Whatever. Either way, you get my point. But this tells us its stats, but down here, this tells us its behavior, right? So I can tell you that Imperial frigate, it has a target painter, it can attack things, and it can armor rep. Now, what that also means is, because of the nature of things, I think if we look at this, we're going to see a stat: behavior, armor repair duration, behavior, armor repair discharge. So the discharge is 0, which means I guess you can't necessarily cap it out and force it to stop repairing in the way that you normally can. If it had a discharge requirement, then you actually could cap it out and force it to stop repairing. I'll have to look into how much that works. Hold on. Oh, yeah. No, it seems like they rep for free. That's unfortunate. But there should be that target painter bonus behavior. Behavior, armor repair, behavior shield boost. Maybe not? Maybe they have the capability of target painting, but not the actual, like, stats for it. I'm not 100% sure, but maybe apparently I'm confused at this point. But point I'm trying to make is that the stats control what happens, but the behaviors make it happen. So you can tell what kind of capabilities a ship can have by looking at what effects are upon it, right? So there you go. That was my point. I think that might be it for Hobelaks, though. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Was this valuable to anybody? I know I often get some questions about Hobelaks, so I hope that this helped kind of go a little bit into how I read the tea leaves. Oh. Okay, good. Excellent. All right. Yeah, so I guess the biggest thing to learn here is that, like, what we're seeing here out of these categories are distribution of a cohesive concept, right? So, like, when a new rat is introduced, it'll show up in the new items, plus it will have attributes per type, plus it'll probably have effects. So the attributes define what it is, the effects define what it does, the strings are all of the descriptions for it. There's other things too where, like, so this string exists because this string does down here, right? The last, oh, there is another point, which is this final column off to the right here, which I want to show you guys. This final column is extremely useful when it comes to the the string thing, especially with the fact that they change stuff. So this tells you if it's assigned to something, right? So I can tell you that this is the description of the Megathron Federate issue, and it's of type ID this. So I can actually go to here and type in that type ID, and look, there it is. There's the Megathron Federation Navy, or Federal issue or whatever, and here's the old string, and here's the change that's being made, right? So when they do that silly trick where they put in a stand-in thing and then change it, usually it's already tied to an object, and so it ends up changing the name of the thing here too. So if they named a thing Foo and then they changed it from Foo to Rapier, then this will go from saying description of item Foo to description of item Rapier, because these are all derived, information. So, and a lot of the newer stuff don't have any information, right? Which leads me to the interesting thing. We were talking a little bit about it. So there's the HQ system clouds. We have these 4 HQ system clouds, okay? If we go to here, we see that there's more than that. There's a bunch of extra strings that haven't really been tied to anything yet. There's stargates, for each of the systems. There's 5 Caldari ones, 3 Galente ones, 3 Mimitar ones, and 2 Amar ones. So, don't know what an HQ is, but I suspect that, you know, the clouds are related to this, which is related to more of this Empire at War thing, right? And then there's also a string that says Seasons of Red Stargazing. I suspect, given what we've learned today, that red stargazing might be this might be the name of the lunar celebration. I don't know how on the nose they want to be, where like red is the representation of the color of China, but it's possible. But either way, there's a season of red stargazing in connection to all of these stargates, or potentially connected because they're coming in, they're being put in at about the same time. And then here's all the normal, or here's all the descriptions that we saw, or for the items that we saw. And the other thing I really like is that if you look, they're actually adding in descriptions for some of the confusing stuff in the game, in the UI. So now there's a description that tells you the difference between what is velocity, what is radial velocity, what is transversal velocity, and what is angular velocity. And so there's descriptions for each. Velocity is forward speed. Radial velocity is rate of change of distance. Transversal velocity is speed at which the entity is moving perpendicular to its direction from you. Angular velocity is how fast you and the entity are revolving around each other. Awesome. That's true. Red lights are used in stargazing, but I guess what it reminds me of is like how red this picture is, right? I understand that that's a stand-in picture and it's obviously Triglavian. I'm just pointing out, like, especially as we're entering into this time of like dealing with these stars turning red. I don't know if it's going to be part of the lunar festival. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like China, it might be China red, but it also might just be as these stars are becoming more and more relevant. Literally, there's an event about monitoring the stars, the red stars, gazing at the red stars, red stargazing. So, I mean, like, let's keep things relatively simple. Chinese New Year has a lot of red associated with it. That's true. But here's a counter theory. Ready? If we look at this, the most gates are the Caldari, with the next being Galente, with the Mimitar having few, and the Amar having even fewer, having the fewest. So, let's say these stargates are the stargates that connect to the headquarters systems or otherwise important Pakvin systems. The Caldari lost the most number of systems to Pakvin. The Galente lost a few. The Mimitar lost very little. And the Amar lost the least. Or at least they won the most. So, if this was to be related to I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying, like, that's an alternative theory as to how this could play out, right? That's the kind of thing that you got to think about when we're looking at these kinds of things. It could very well be that this is about the empires breaking back into Pakvin. And I'm only hoping that at one point during this conversation, at least once during this stream, the CCPs that are in here think to themselves, well, shit. That's what I want. All right. I think that might be it. pulls out the tinfoil. Exactly. Any questions, comments, concerns? We're going into the weekend. I don't know what my week looks like next week, but I do have, you know, those bigger videos that I want to record, or those bigger presentations I want to do, including introduction to industry, how to get started as a new player, multiple overviews, etc. But CCP gave us plenty to talk about today. So if that's it, I think that means that I have been Ashtarothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put even to context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you guys for coming, and you know, it's been a lot of fun. So look, guys, the transition from Twitch has been successful, but not without its roughness. So if you were a Twitch subscriber before, you can consider becoming a member now. It's about the equivalent, or you can send super chats or super thanks. The only reason why I bring this up extra right now is because, like, apparently they want to demonetize my streams because I play EVE Online music. So that was unforeseen, and it's really hard for me to do this if all of my videos start out by default being demonetized. So gonna have to figure out what to do about that. But in the meantime, if you want to help, hey Garland, thank you so much for joining as a member. If you want to help out, make me not have to be quite as paranoid about that, the only real solution is membership, Patreon, merch, you know, support from you guys. So I'm going to be working on it from my end, and I'm just going to keep on making stuff. But yeah, if you enjoy my stuff, consider pitching a couple bucks or whatever. I do want to thank, on that note, my co-designers, Abyssus, Ikawarazu-chan, Arydanika the Queen, BlackRoseNoble, Dajat Lemmont, Drake, Golden Age Stories, J. Kuhn, LM1, Malik Starfire, MidnightSpaceMonkey, NotJustFun, Seedsaplenty, Serenalen with no eyes, Syliana Vel'ash, Nephilim, Grendel, Zaul Nex, as well as my Immortal tier patrons or supporters, Ebo1337 and Rid. You guys rock. Hey! Oh no, that's the same news. Got it. Streamlabs is just catching up. So, and thank you guys so much for watching the videos, checking out the stuff, sharing my videos and streams. I've been seeing it more and more lately, my stuff being recommended to people, and it's incredibly heartwarming. Not only does it help actually make sure that there's so much bad information about EVE Online that's out there. Like, we really do all have to do our part in combating it by putting out the good information. So I really appreciate all of you who are viewers, who are members and supporters, who are advocates of the stream and going out and helping other people learn about it and realize that, like, there's a lot more to EVE than what most people realize. That's what we're all here for. So, what was that one? Oh! Did it not show that? Hey, thank you so much for that, Servius. I'm going to have to update all my lists, aren't I? Well, either way, I do appreciate it, you guys. It's very thoughtful. And everyone who enjoys my stuff is very appreciative, I guess is a good way to put it. So, yeah. I think it sucks because after every stream, I always, like, remember what it is I'm supposed to talk about. Hey, LM1 gifting 5 membership subscriptions to Epic, Ikawarazu-chan, Lunix Spoons, Alone Gardener, Max Magandons. Hey, I appreciate it, guys. Hype train, exactly. That's cool of you, LM1. I really appreciate it. You're on my... Yeah, you're on the co-designer list. You're great. You're good stuff, my friend. Oh, hey, look, I have notes here. Merch. Join the convocation of Empyreans. Aderon Robotics is recruiting. Galente Federation is kicking ass and having fun. Come and take part in it. There's tons of fun going on every single day. We need more. You can come as an alpha clone if you want to. People really need to start bugging me more about giving away the Plex that I said I was going to. Yep, and that's it. So, with all that said, I appreciate it, LM. I think unless there's anything else, I am going to wrap things up. So once again, I have been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden. And until next week, I'll see you in space. I made the Wrecking Machine video, so they can't take it from me.
Bring on the wrecking machine. For every city